Welcome to Executive Education in Sustainable Fashion. Today's guest is Matt Scanlan, the founder and CEO of Naadam. We're going to talk about how he built a sustainable company, having had no background in fashion whatsoever.
Hello, and very welcome to this session of our Executive Learning Program. We are here at Naadam, a direct-to-consumer cashmere company, and I'm sitting here with Matt Scanlan. Very nice to be here, Matt. Maybe start off with a little bit short introduction from your side and take that maybe into why you started Naadam.
So it's been a crazy kind of journey, and I guess I'll preface that I didn't plan for any of this, and I still kind of look around occasionally and I'm like, I can't believe I now run a clothing company. We actually started in nonprofit work. So the business model stemmed from trying to solve problems for communities of nomadic herders in remote regions of Mongolia. And it was only after unsuccessfully turning that nonprofit work into a calculable return for the community that we decided the best thing to do was to get into business, because a business would create sustainable economic solutions that could support the community. It ended up that business was in purchasing raw cashmere in these remote areas from goats, and eventually making sweaters. But to be totally honest, we didn't know anything about making sweaters, and we didn't even know that that's kind of where we were going to end up. We were going to buy raw material, and then we kind of took each step along the way and figured out each one of those supply chain steps, which inevitably led us to having a unique level of transparency and authentic learnings into making really good finished product, which is knitwear.
How long did this setup take you to go from your exploration in Mongolia and then move into a full-fledged business?
Yeah, it took, I would say, a year and a half, really, maybe a little bit longer. And it's funny, people really like to sensationalize like rapid growth e-commerce businesses. The reality is a lot of hard work, a lot of trial and error, a ton of mistakes were made in the process of getting there. What we focused on originally was how to make really good product. We knew that if we were authentic about how we did it and ended up getting a better product, then that process was ultimately going to distinguish the brand once we invested in it. And once we did, it started to grow really quickly.
Did this sustainability aspect, was that something you had at heart from the beginning and something that became really very much the soul of the company, or was that something you gradually discovered and decided to capitalize on?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. The word sustainability, and anybody that's ever spoken to me about sustainability will know this, I think actually does not properly qualify what we do. And I think not to go too far into it, but I think just generally speaking, sustainability in apparel is too loosely defined. So if you had a clothing brand, how you would define sustainability is just generally different than the way I would define it. For us, the way we define it, and this is a really important thing, is it's about economic sustainability. It's creating sustainable systems. It's not about giving a thing away and saying, oh, we help people. It's about improving the circumstance in a way that once I'm out of the situation, it can continue to exist in a better format than before I got there. So we didn't know any of that. We didn't have that definition when we started. We approached it from a very, I would say, humble / almost ignorant way. We said, okay, here's this community. We want to help. We want to support them. They helped us, and there's a backstory about how I first got there. But we said, we want to help. So what can we do? And they said, okay, well, health of our animals is very important to us. Okay, well, I could support the health of those animals. I could invest in veterinary programs and breeding programs and livestock insurance, things that ultimately would improve the value of the material that was extracted from that animal. That animal is a goat. That goat's material is called cashmere. And so we thought about in those terms. For us, we never approach sustainability or nonprofit work or any of those kind of buzzwords in a way where we think we know what's best. Let's say you're a herder. I come to you and I say, okay, you've been living on this land for as long as you can remember, right? You grew up here, your parents grew up here, their parents, so on and so forth. You know your culture, you know your ecosystem better than I ever will. You tell me what you need. And then I'll work to create solutions that foster the things that already are existing but might need support within your ecosystem. So we kind of uncovered that along the way, and we developed that process. And ultimately, then when we built the business, that humility, that sense of the people we work with know best and we're here to support them, stemmed back into everything else we did in the business. So it's been a very organic, kind of thoughtful, less marketable almost way of building a sustainable business. I'll say I think we do it differently, but potentially more authentically than a lot of folks because it was a total learning process. Made mistakes along the way.
So when we talk about this, which is popular terminology is called corporate social responsibility, which is you're heavily engaged in. What are some of the particular actions? I read, for instance, on your reading up on you a little bit, I also found out that you have been running a vaccination program for the. What are the things you do actually in concrete terms to support this philosophy?
So a couple of different things. I believe in building symbiotic systems in which when I support this system, it supports me, and I'm part of the system, and it gets going back around kind of in a circle. What that literally means, so we look at fostering the health of the animal, right? So you talk to a herder, they say, okay, well, just make sure my animals are healthy, because when they're healthy, I have sustainability in my income. I can protect myself against natural disaster, climate change, etc. So the first thing we ever did was actually a livestock insurance program where we recognized the climate was unique. So Mongolia, it's about negative 40 degrees on average throughout the winter, and these people exist. They really subsist in this climate. However, that variability and that extremeness within that climate has produced really high mortality rates. So imagine your whole life is dependent on the health of those goats, and they die. What the hell do? You can't, it's really tough. So we came in, we said, well, if they all die, it's out of your control, we'll buy a livestock insurance premium for you so that you get paid out if certain triggers are hit, etc. So that was the first thing we did. And then we recognized that our insurance providers were not actually capable of recognizing some of the micro shifts that took place at the cultural, like we call it the Sum level. Sum is like a town in Mongolia. And so we more or less abandoned them as a partner. We said, okay, now let us develop this strategy on our own. And figured, okay, how can we create that same level of sustainability and insurance? So we started investing in vaccination programs, and that is quite unique. So we'll take an entire herd of animals and we'll inject them with a vaccination that protects them against basically disease. And I could go into the details of those diseases, but it's boring. So we'll vaccinate them. We've now vaccinated over 1 million goats for thousands of families. Each family will have 200 to 1,000 animals. So the impact is massive. 1,000 goats will produce tons and tons of material. And the beauty of it is we now buy all that material. So outside of this nonprofit work, I just want to draw a really clear distinction in terms of how we think about this whole CSR thing. It's good to do nonprofit work. It's good to do the vaccinations. And at a relationship level, it's important, right? Because I helped you, so now you trust me. The way we purchase material is really the largest impact we bring to these communities. So traditionally, a trader arrived to this remote region, and in this circumstance, you're going to be a herder again, and I'm a trader, and I show up and I say, I'll buy everything you have, but I'm going to buy for $2. In this circumstance, you think you can sell it for $4, but I'm the only person buying, so I'm only paying you $2. And if you don't sell to me, you don't sell it at all. If anybody else shows up, they're my friend, and we fix the price together. So all of us are only paying $2. I show up now and I say, don't listen to those other guys. Don't work with those traders. They're middlemen, and they are only benefiting from driving your price lower so that they can sell it for a higher price. Let me come in. I'm going to pay double. They're paying $2. I'm going to pay $4. They're paying $3. I'm going to pay $6. And I'm going to buy everything from everybody. And I'm also going to do the nonprofit work for you. So we have the relationship because I'm helping you for free, basically, from a nonprofit perspective. But now I'm going to come in and, based on that nonprofit work, realize that the value of what you have is worth more, and I'm going to pay you the true value. I have no interest in driving prices down. In fact, I only want them to go up because I don't play with brokers and mills and manufacturers. I don't subject the business to all these other steps and middlemen. I do it all. So that economic impact of changing the pricing terms for the raw material shifts the local economy in a way that I think, we frankly could have never expected. So you now go to the areas where we source material from, these SUMs in these remote areas of Mongolia, and it's like a different world, like paved roads, swing sets around schools, hospitals, parks with trees growing. This last year we built Naadam Park, not because the name of our company is Naadam, but because Naadam's the name of a festival. And we planted 2,000 trees. We built a soccer field that's totally irrigated. It's going to be the only irrigated soccer field for 500 miles and the only park with trees growing. This is a desert. Things don't grow. Local tourism now is going to come to the area. Long after I'm gone, this area is still going to be a place where people come to visit. So, and obviously that will improve the circumstances of the local economy even more. So we really think about going a step beyond what I think traditional CSR demands. It's funny, I've never even thought of CSR.
No.
Never even thought along those
something
terms.
that came natural in this scenario.
It's instinctual, right? And I think part of the reason we're very transparent and honest about this is because I think it's like, for us, feels requisite. Like, yeah, duh, we would do business like this. You mean I'm supposed to go in and not care about these people? They're part of my business. They're my supply chain. I never understood how people thought about these things as segmented and not intertwined and ultimately supporting one another. It was not aligned with my value system. It was not aligned with the way I was brought up. It was not, I think, ultimately what culturally we are now coming to expect from brands. So yeah, it wasn't planned. I never think about the word CSR. I think about doing the right thing.
Wow. So you must have created a very happy community there in Mongolia.
It's very unique. It's funny. I go back now a couple times a year, mostly in the summer because it's not cold. And it's like seeing old family members. Like it's the strangest thing. I'm a Jewish kid from Connecticut, and here I am with like basically familial relationships on the other side of planet Earth in Mongolia. It's very very unique.
Quite unique.
Yeah.
Definitely feel good story. Now, once you have bought the raw material there, how do you process these things, and how do you take charge of your own supply chain?
Yeah, so that's really key, and I think it has become a differentiating factor in terms of our value proposition to the customer, not only from the storytelling side, but ultimately because of the pricing that we can deliver and the quality based on the transparency that we can couple together with that. So, think about it this way. If you know every step that exists within a system, inevitably you also know all the inefficiencies in that system. You know the things that you can take out that might improve costs but not hurt quality. And so we can analyze the entire system. Additionally, because we source raw material and can watch every step of material processing through to the actual knitting of the product, we can backtrack based on customer data. So if you were a customer and you like a navy blue cardigan, I know that there's specific material that comes right off the goat that is better for making that product. And that's been years of learning and gathering data, but the reality then becomes that I track it from the second I purchase it. So We literally comb the cashmere out of the animal. I don't do that as much anymore. And then we barcode the bag that it was put in. And that bag is, okay, this is coarse material, this is fine material, this is long, this is short, this is brown, this is black, this is white, this is gray, whatever. And then we keep that bag barcoded at every stage of its processing. So it goes into a washing and dehairing phase where it gets cleaned, basically. So if you take the material right off the animals are dirty. They live outside. So you got to clean it. And in the process, you remove coarse fiber that is ultimately like the hair on our head that shouldn't be in a sweater. So we go through that phase, and then we oversee all logistics. And this is actually really important. Not something we ever really thought about, but just, again, one of those requisite concepts of like, yeah, we don't want logistics that overly pollutes the environment. We used to ship our product around the world. So after that dehairing washing phase, it would go all the way up to northern Italy. The carbon emissions, the footprint of that is unbelievable. Also, I could say it was made in Italy, and ultimately, no one cared. So I said, okay, let me just truck it a shorter distance, 4 to 8 hours to get it spun into yarn. And then it gets spun as a yarn in a facility that also knits the product. A lot of our manufacturing is turning into a seamless knitting process, which means you cut down on labor, so you're not doing that hand stitching or that seam linking that is normally how you make cut and sew product. A lot of it comes right out of the machine, fully made, and just needs to be washed. All the chemicals we use are non-toxic. We never use toxic dyes. We're very thoughtful about the impact our production has on the environment. Now, caveat, we make a product that along the way inevitably will contribute to polluting the environment to some degree. Yeah, we care about cutting that down. And yeah, we're thoughtful about not maximizing that footprint. But it's impossible for apparel to be 100% carbon neutral or non-toxic. It's just inevitable that I'll sell you something and I bet at some point you're gonna throw it away. It happens. It's just a commodity. It's a product. So we are transparent about that. We know the reality of it, and we just share that kind of practical, thoughtful view with our customer, and that I'd rather be 20 or 30% of the way to 100 with the intention to get to 100 than 10% but tell you I'm 50%, or 10% tell you I'm 100%. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear right now, but I think that's bullshit. So yeah, we have our own views, I think, to a certain degree on this.
So that's kind of amazing, because you have full traceability on the entire supply chain, from combing the goat all the way into the consumer.
I know exactly where the fibers in this sweater came from. I know the animals that they come from. It's almost creepy. So before this whole thing started, I got stranded in the middle of the Gobi Desert, and I was living with a family in this remote area, and I had no communication, no one knew where I was, no electricity, no running water, and this family took me in, and I learned how to herd goats, I learned how to milk goats, I learned how to ride a horse, a motorcycle. I existed in this community, and I had a deep appreciation for it, but at the same time, I lived with animals. It's very, very strange. And every year I go back, more or less, the same animals are there producing the same output, and we source from that group. So. I think it's an unparalleled level of traceability. Maybe we're not the only ones, but I think we're certainly the only ones doing it in cashmere.
Interesting. Now, if we look at that, because Naadam is very much a business idea focused and revolving around the idea of responsibility, both for the environment and a social responsibility too, of course. But what would you say to anyone in the industry who has a fashion business and tells you, listen, I really want to become a sustainable, socially responsible company? What are some of the advice you will give away?
I would focus on product market fit before you do anything. It's good to be sustainable. It's good to have vision for the way you want the world to work, but unless you've thought about practically how that opportunity flourishes from an economic, fiscal, business perspective, it's worthless. And I don't mean to sound jaded or cynical, but the reality is, and I always recognize this quite intimately, that you need to be able to sell product to actually have an impact. And if you haven't thought about how the product you make people buy, what function or use it has in their life, no one's going to buy it, and you won't have the money to continue to do the work that you're so passionate about. So, one of the things that we struggled with and then eventually figured out was product market fit. How to price our product, how to manufacture and engineer our product for the right customer, so that it could be successful, so we could sell enough of it that I could go back and buy more, and then everything I did became more sustainable. So, fashion is, I think there's a broad spectrum of what that means for people. There's clothing, there's apparel, there's fashion, there's high fashion, there's couture, there's all this stuff. I think recognizing what it is you're trying to do is really important. If you're at the very high end of fashion and ultimately you're just producing art, then recognize that that's what it is, and don't think that you're making a commodity level product that you're going to sell millions and millions of units of. There won't be consumers for it. So I really like to think about the category we're in a practical and fundamentally business, with a fundamentally business-minded approach. And that's the biggest piece of feedback / criticism ultimately myself that I could give.
Yeah. Do you feel like this requires a business? Because when we talk about sustainability and environment today, I believe there might be a risk that a lot of companies will make claims on being socially and environmentally responsible, and it becomes somewhat of a populistic term, and it becomes a tool for marketing, etc. What are some of the things you think you need to do in order to become credible to the consumer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Firstly, I agree. I think that what you are referencing has actually already happened. And I think that there's a lot of overusage of the word sustainability as it pertains to marketing apparel. And the reality is it's hard to know who's telling the truth and who's not. And you hope everybody has the right intention, but statistically speaking, it's not possible that everybody does. So there's some fakers out there. To kind of build up your credibility, I think you have to have levels of recognizable transparency. You have to be able to show end to end what it is. You have to be able to validate those claims for people. There are easy things you can do. You can work within facilities that have accreditations and certifications. I will caveat, however, that I don't necessarily agree with accreditation or certification facilities. I think can be pay to play and it can be a nice name tag, but doesn't always do the work that we hope. Having said that, it's an easy way to get some initial validation that isn't the worst. I think video content, I think really exposing the reality of what you're doing for people is important, and I think you need to be able to easily point out all the things you're doing wrong to show people what you believe is right. And that's kind of the tone that we've taken. We never say we do it 100% the right way, because it's not possible that we do. When we mess something up, we tell you we messed it up. We own it, and we recognize that intentionality is more important than excuses. And so we present our intention to make it better at all times. And I think you have to have that kind of tone to represent authenticity. It's ultimately, from a marketing perspective, too easy to fake if you don't do it.
Right. So in my sense, or as listening to you, Matt, you feel like it's sustainability really starts with an emotional engagement to the issues.
That's exactly correct.
And how do you, as CEO of this company, how do you get those emotions and the commitment through to your employees? How do you kind of make the virus spread in the company?
I think naturally what we've seen is that when we put out what we are and what we want to be to people, the right folks gravitate towards that mission. I also think it's about continued reinforcement. We build into everything we do culturally elements of sustainability. Before we started here today, I had a gentleman who's working with us on building up programs internally where we send groups of employees to work in homeless shelters and other areas. We weave it through our culture in ways that don't necessarily have to do with our product, but just into the fiber of the community. And we make things like this, we develop cultural norms internally that stem from just caring about your ecosystem and your environment. I also think it goes back to that transparency. Ultimately, the people that work here are also our consumers, and if they can sense that there's bullshit in something we're doing, they call it out first, and we have a culture that is you're allowed to do that. You think that the way we said that was a little too, we glorified it or romanticized it too much? You have the right to say it, and we collectively work on reaffirming the reality for our customer. So yeah, it's putting power in people's hands. It's creating opportunities that go beyond what we do from a product perspective, and authenticity and transparency at every step. You just have to reinforce it.
But you don't have a specific onboarding program like where you let people.
The onboarding programs like this.
It's like a meeting with you, kind of.
It is. And
well, it's highly inspiring. So, do you feel ever when you talk about your business that you are at a disadvantage against another cashmere company who maybe doesn't work with sustainability?
No, never. I'll also say that I really don't look around at the competition much.
Right.
I always felt that the winners were always staring straight ahead and they weren't looking left and right.
Right.
And so I preach that to the rest of the company, that if you're obsessed with looking at what everybody else is doing, you're not looking in the direction that I'm looking, which is straight ahead at what our goals are and how we're going to do things. I have not recognized that a competitor of ours had some sort of advantage by not being sustainable. In fact, I think a lot of the things that give us that unique competitive advantage are because we're sustainable. Because of the way we built our supply chain, our products cost less because we remove those inefficiencies in the supply chain. Because we have that transparency, we know we're getting better quality. So now I can deliver a better quality at a lower price than almost anybody else. And it was funny, for the first time this year, we built a product that I think properly communicated that to a really broad audience. We said, okay, we can make this sweater cost $75 and it can be 100% cashmere. That's just the perfect message we want to send people. We want to show everybody this is the lowest price in the world for this product, and we get it because we're sustainable. And I think that that's meaningful.
Great. Now, what do you think is the future here when it comes to sustainability and corporate social responsibility? What do you see in the horizon here?
I think there's going to be some course correcting. I don't think it's perfect. I think that there are some major issues, and ultimately those things need to be sorted out on a larger level. Those things include that marketing language we spoke about. I think it stems to the certifications that are used. I think there are going to be winners and then there will be losers. If you look around at the group of apparel brands, and let's just think about apparel and fashion, not accessories, shoes, whatever, but let's think about apparel. The major winners in the United States in the past 3-4 years, Reformation, Naadam, Everlane, I guess you could lump in Rothy's and Allbirds, and those, like, they're all sustainable, right? They're all carrying that message in a really authentic way. And I think as those guys continue to win, that will have a ripple effect into, hey, this is what works and this is how you do it. And that will wipe out the people that are doing it incorrectly. And in that way, there'll be a bit of a course correcting. So I hope.
Yeah. So I want to finish off asking, because I know we have a lot of viewers here who may be in business for themselves and having small businesses. What advice would you give them? How do you scale something in a company, in a smaller company, and become this at the forefront of social responsibility and sustainability?
Yeah, there are a million ways to do it. And so I can speak about my experience pretty much only, which was it wasn't easy. And if had I not always, I think, delusionally believed in myself and my mission, I would have failed multiple times already. I look back at when I first started at early conversations, and I'm like, what was I talking about? I can't believe I was listening to myself. Like, I must have sounded like an idiot. But I did. I believed in myself. I believed in what I thought was right. And I believed in the learning process that I was going to undergo, and I understood that I had a unique perspective. And I think when you let yourself get too easily pushed around by other people's inputs, and that happens, right? You want to raise money, you want to network. Everybody has an idea for what you really should be. And I can't tell you how many times people say, well, Naadam's a stupid name. Why would you name it that? That doesn't make any sense. Like, everybody has an opinion, and you need to trust your instinct and your vision above everything else.
Very inspiring, Matt. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you to all of you guys out there. Now you feel free to join us for our live WeChat for a Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Now join us online and on social media with our experts so we can answer your questions directly and keep this conversation going.